Yeah.
There you go.
And blueberries, you crush the blueberries.
But VCR, obviously, bro, biggest news this week. Obviously, that merger, a $21 billion sale, ultimately, I think is what this is going to be worth.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts when you saw this?
Well, obviously, I thought it was an amazing mustache. I think it's probably the most important mustache in the business right now. I was blown away by it, as well as a friend of mine, CC, on drums. He absolutely loved it. Many tweets were shared. I think, he needs to go to one of the poppies backstage so that they can fix it and kind of trim it up. I got a little Vince going on here, but that's an honor of the GOAT. But I'm going to go to the poppies. I'm going to get the poppies to straighten it out for me and all that stuff. Obviously, I think the hair dye was a little too much, especially with the eyebrows and stuff like that. I mean, who are you fooling? You're not fooling anybody. You're old as fuck and everybody knows it. But overall, just an amazing mustache. $21 billion. I don't know. I don't know if it's that expensive, but it's certainly a high profile mustache. As far as the sale of the company goes, I think it's great, man. I think everybody wins here. I don't think WWE is losing anything at all. I think on the contrary, everything's going to kind of stay the same for them. And, similarly to what they've done with UFC, they haven't really changed too much of what makes it appealing to the fans and to their base. And I really don't expect anything different on the WWE side of things. What really intrigues me here is the crossover element and the potential crossover possibilities. I mean, who wouldn't want to see Conor McGregor in the ring, talking shit to Paul Heyman? Who wouldn't want to see John Bones Jones and Roman Reigns lock it up? Daniel Cormier and Brock Lesnar. I mean, a variety of different wrestlers. So what I think, too, is this also opens up a lot of possibilities for a lot of these fighters who at the end of their careers, what are they really going to do? They're going to go into commentating. They're going to be, maybe journalists or commentators in some regard there. Now they have an option to get into pro wrestling, and they have an option to do that and to make themselves an attraction and to add to the overall product that they have going on there in WWE. So I think this is win-win for everybody involved. And wow, man, hats off to Vince, hats off to everybody, man. I mean, like, they made off like fucking bandits here,
No, definitely. And I think it's important for our audience to understand this, because I think that, again, it'll sort of segue into a lot of the hoopla that followed after the CNBC interview where Vince and Ari Emanuel, the Endeavor and new company CEO.
Hey, Fern, can I ask you a question? Because I know you're a big fan of these shows, but is he the guy that they based Ari Gold on Entourage off of? Because that's what I had heard. I had heard that from a pal of mine.
I read the same thing. I don't know for sure. I mean, probably I'm gonna have to just do a quick Google search on that and maybe do a little more in-depth research. But I know I did read this. I did hear the same thing you did. But what's interesting though, Pat, obviously it's going to segue into what we're going to talk about next. Obviously, is with this merger, what does it mean in terms of Vince McMahon and his presence within WWE? Again, a lot of conversation, and we'll get to we'll get into the rating later, because we know that the Raw after Mania is always probably one of the most watched episodes of Monday Night Raw every calendar year, right? And despite it doing a 2.26, which was still pretty high, considering the fact that it had been in the 1.7s, 1.8s for many weeks even before Mania, there was a lot of speculation about what this means for Vince. And I think, shout out to D. Rotten, again, our great executive producer, for sending this out on our group chat there. And by the way, D, if you can stream this episode, maybe get it up on the chat there, that'd be great too, as we're live. It's interesting because here's the way the management looks now, considering the merger. Now, Ari Emanuel obviously is the Endeavor and the new company CEO, NewCo. Vince McMahon will be the NewCo executive chairman, and you'll be like, Fernando, what is this, semantics? But I'll tell you why that's important. Language is important here. Then Mark Shapiro is the Endeavor and NewCo president and the COO. Jason Lublin is the Endeavor CFO, the chief financial officer. Andrew Schleimer is the NewCo CFO. Dana White remains as UFC president. Lawrence Epstein remains the UFC COO, and Nick Khan remains the WWE president. Now, you're probably wondering, Fernando, why'd you just give us a whole roster list of why this entire corporate structure? And the reason it's important is because, again, WWE is going to remain a publicly traded company. Okay, and again, I did a little research here, and again, I don't want to step on some of my classmates' toes who are actual business school professors. But you don't need a business degree to know this. That again, when you look at the corporate structure in a publicly traded company, if you're going to change the structure, if you're going to change titles and change the hierarchy of control and power, then that has to be made public. But if you're not going to be changing the inner structure and it's remaining the same, right, then there's nothing to report. So vis-a-vis, again, in layman's terms, nothing has changed within the hierarchy of WWE. Nick Khan remains the president of WWE, okay, which again handles a lot of the live events, coordinating for advertising and sponsorship. So when WWE and all their advertising deals are up for grabs, Nick Khan is in the room negotiating these deals. Right. Another important factor is that what else did not change within the structure of WWE is that Paul Levesque remains the CCO, the Chief Content Officer. So again, in layman's terms, what you're seeing being booked on Raw, SmackDown, to some extent maybe NXT, even though Michael Hickenbottom is executive vice president there of content.
Right? This guy went shoot with the fucking name on Shawn Michaels. Right? I love it. That's hilarious.
This is the thing. So I think after this merger was announced, obviously all the speculation, and we saw all the Mark podcasts, all the Mark journalists, right? And talking about, well, what does this mean? Is Vince back in control? Vince owns the company still. So Vince can sit in the locker room having a beer, and he can do that. Again, it's his company. Now, again, Paul Levesque is running creative. That hasn't changed. If it did change, where Vince is handling creative, then within a corporate structure, it's a publicly traded company, that has to be made public in writing. That hasn't happened. So a lot of the speculation, Pat, and all the controversy, and everyone's paranoid. Oh my God, Vince is booking. Look how bad Raw was. Vince wasn't booking Friday. Look how good SmackDown was. That's just not the case.
No, Fern, and you know what? I gotta say, I'm glad that you're mentioning that, because this is business procedure, I guess, or standard business practices, if you will, right? This is a billion-dollar corporation, man. Okay, they're not gonna do something like that and like kayfabe it to the world. Like, well, we're gonna tell them that Paul's in charge, but it's actually Vince. Like, no, that's not what they're gonna fucking do. If stuff like that changes, they're gonna announce it. They have to announce it to their shareholders, and they have to put out a press release.
And Pat, I'm sorry to cut you off. I'll let you finish.
No worries.
The other dynamic that's important is, again, a lot of the Mark podcasts, the journalists ran with a simple sentence that Vince McMahon said during the CNBC interview, which again, folks, you can check out. Really interesting interview. Again, I watch the market a lot. I love watching CNBC, Fox Business too, is when he openly said, well, I'm going to have input, obviously, in some of the bigger storylines, but understand that folks, Paul Levesque is still the CCO. He wasn't removed from that position. He's still running creative. So for all intents and purposes, when it comes down to the final say about what happens with booking, and not booking on 2K, WWE on my PlayStation behind me, but actual booking, a run sheet, and also the creative storylines, like Paul Levesque still has to say. So again, unfortunately, whether Vince said that or not, to either entice the marks and bait them, that remains to be seen. But again, that's what happened this week, where their narrative got hijacked with, hey, Vince said this on CNBC, where he's going to have some input. That's it. Oh, it's over. Paul Levesque is useless. He's just sitting in Gorilla playing, mahjong on his phone. And like, he's not doing anything. That's not the case. And again, listen, I think you know how critical I am of some booking, again, and as a smart, but understand that from a corporate structure, folks, like, Vince does not have the title of CCO. He doesn't have it because it's not there in writing. So I'm sorry, pal. If I just want to make sure.
No. I appreciate that, because you know what? I think you're, and it's good that we're doing this. It's good that we're talking about this, because we're simplifying it. We're breaking it down for people that don't really understand, that got all hopped up on Dave Meltzer's BS that was put out there. You know what I'm saying? I think it's important that we kind of clarify what the situation is. I also would like to say, too, that I think that there's a huge problem amongst the Mark community that they don't want to admit that Triple H books things that they don't like. We have to understand that this is a global product. This is a variety show, essentially. And there's people that are going to want to see this for different things. There were people that were really interested in Omos and Lesnar. There was people that were really interested in Cody and Roman. There was people that were interested in Gunther versus Sheamus versus Drew, because that's the brand of wrestling that they like. So everybody is kind of tickled in their belly, so to speak, when they watch this. You know what I'm saying? Because there's a little bit of something for everybody. He's going to book things that the marks aren't going to like, because the way NXT is presented and the way that the main roster is presented are two different things. The NXT is all about putting people out there. It's all about it's more so catered to the mark audience, right? It's more so catered to the ROH fans. And that's kind of what they did. And if you look at some of their booking and their champions, Adam Cole, I mean, you know, when you think of ROH, that's one of the biggest names in that company's history. It jumps out, you know, and that was a guy who had a big run there, who had a stable there, you know, who was the champion, who delivered some great matches. Unfortunately, the ratings weren't there, but he had great matches with a lot of workers. And, you know, that's what that audience was catered towards. And that's what that product was catered towards. So he was going to book things that they were going to like because that product is for them. With Raw and SmackDown, it's different because you're not just appealing to the hardcores. You're appealing to the women and children, the families. You're appealing to the casuals. You're appealing to the people that just tune in because they're like, oh, shit, wrestling's on. Let me like fucking give it a gander and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So there's going to be a lot of things that he does that people don't like. But this is the thing that boggles me the most, right? Dave Meltzer's the guy who put this out. Sean Ross Sapp are the guys that put this out. And look, no disrespect to them. I think that, you know, they do what they do. They hustle. They've earned their titles. You know what I'm saying? Like
even Keller, though. But Pat, even Keller,
and that's
disappointing because Wade Keller, I would think, was still probably one of the few reliable, credible sources out there, and even he jumped into the pool.
But you know what it is, Fern? I think they all follow the trend. They all follow whatever's trending at the moment, and that was a big headline that was trending at the moment. Yeah. And the problem is a lot of these guys don't have the time to wait and see. They kind of have to jump so that they can get some clicks, so that they can get views, so that they can keep the traffic up, you know? Yeah. They don't want to just wait and see what happens. And Meltzer's reporting that Mr. McMahon was sitting in Gorilla, and, you know, he had a headset on, and he's telling people what to do and all this stuff. That wasn't even confirmed by anybody.
Yeah.
Okay? It was not confirmed by anybody at all. And Vince was there WrestleMania weekend because he was selling the fucking company, and it's the company's flagship show. You know what I'm saying? It's their biggest show of the year. Of course he's going to fucking be there. He was there Monday too. But also, from what we understand, and Mia Yim tweeted out that there was a lot of people that were sent home. The talent hadn't been with their family. They hadn't been home in a week, and they were given time after WrestleMania to rest up. So that's why the roster was so thin. That's why there were so many rewrites. There was a lot of people that were banged up, that were beat up. You know, Drew McIntyre's another guy. Oh, Drew's leaving. He was taken off of SmackDown. You know, his contract wasn't meeting what he wanted, blah, blah, blah. Dude's injured, man. He's injured right now. I'm pretty sure that they're going to figure it out when the time comes to figure it out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally, yeah.
But if anything, I just want to say, you know, just in closing here, that a lot of people are believing a lot of the wrong people on the internet and are running with it. And this is also a lot of this, you know, anti-Vince narrative and this boogeyman thing that marks have with Vince, where they fucking hate him for whatever reason. And, you know, they want to find a reason to say that the product is bad because of him, but he doesn't really have anything to do with it. Now, is he going to say, hey, Paul, you know, this is what I think about this, like for a WrestleMania main event or a SummerSlam main event? Yeah, I'm sure he's going to give his input. But at the end of the day, and from what we heard out of Triple H's mouth, that decision rests with him, okay? Mm-hmm. He's the one who makes that call. Does he get input from other people? I'm sure. I'm sure. But at the end of the day, he's going to make that call. So for all you people out there that are believing that Vince is back, Vince is not back. It's still Triple H's show. And SmackDown proved that it's still Triple H's show, because that was a very Triple H-centric program.
Yeah, and also, too, again, Bruce Pritchard's still working in production. He's still working in creative with Paul. So, again, the idea that, you know, and again, there's been some things over the years, but by and large, 90% of what Bruce Pritchard's helped put out there in terms of creative ideas has gotten over. And it's making money. It's so gay. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, I know that a lot of people give Kevin Dunn a lot of grief about what Kevin Dunn represents, but the truth is that when it comes to storytelling, when it comes to the booking, when it comes to the creative, the writing, I mean, obviously Paul is leading the way there. Paul's the one that is delegating and its final call. And it's funny because it's like, I know you brought to my attention off the air today about the recent episode of Keeping It 100 with Conan and Disco Inferno. They even talked about like, hey, listen, let's set the record straight about these Mark podcasts about Vince and this and that. Like, oh, well, Cody lost to teach him a lesson. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You're going to spend, because again, and I actually looked this up, I think Cody's actually one of the top 5 wage earners in the WWE in terms of the contract, right? Like, the idea that Vince flew out to Atlanta, okay, to personally go to Cody's house, okay, to meet with him, to sit down, meet with Brandy, okay, and offer him the money he did to jump ship last spring, to build this ridiculously long, and I don't mean ridiculous like inflammatory or, but just like this ridiculously long storyline about, what the mission is, about the story and everything, coming back in, he got injured, put on 3 hell of a magnificent matches with Seth Rollins last year, got injured, and then he came back at the Rumble. He won the Rumble, the whole story. Do you think that they went to all this trouble to, first of all, pay him? I think he's making I could be wrong. He's making somewhere between, I think, three and change, maybe 4. It's a lot of money. Are you going to pay a guy that much money and make sure that he gets a good cut of his royalty, of his merch, which, by the way, is still one of the biggest merch sellers? You think they're going to do all that to teach him a lesson? It's nonsense. But that's the narrative being permeated by Sapp, by Meltzer, by JD Covalent, a local guy in New York that does a Mark podcast too. It just seems like Vince is a good businessman. I mean, I always like his decisions, but creatively. But as a businessman, there's no arguing. Like, the body of work is there. He's a smart businessman. You don't go to all this trouble to, the language this week, Pat. They jobbed Cody out. How is it jobbing out Cody?
No,
it's a bad term to use.
No, man. They're telling a story here, man. You know what I'm saying? They're continuing a longer story. And you know what? Like, everything thus far has been predictable, right? Cody was going to come in at WrestleMania, right? You assumed he was going to beat Rollins. He did, right? And then, okay, well, Rollins is going to split. They're going to do the 50-50 booking. Then he beats him 2 more times, right? Then you're like, okay, Cody's coming back at the Rumble. Cody's going to win the Rumble, right? Cody won the Rumble. Now Cody is taking on Roman. He's looking good. They're having all these good segments. They're talking great. This is the one thing that was unpredictable. And I think a good chunk of us, even yourself included, thought that this would be Cody's moment. You know what I'm saying? I think we all thought that this was going to be it. But they didn't. And they kept it going longer.
It was a swerve. Let's be honest. They all swerved us because
they swerved everybody, not just fans, but people that have been in the business, people that have been in booking committees. Like, they understood, you know what I'm saying? Like, that this is what was going to happen, and they swerved us all. And hats off to them, man. And it's not the worst thing in the world to have that title on Roman.
Listen, and we'll get to our WrestleMania results, and we'll sort of like the good and bad of Mania. I mean, I called this weeks ago when we did our preview. Like, I just had the sense that there's a merchandising gold mine, on the horizon. It is the 1,000 days. Pretty soon he'll eclipse Pedro Morales. Maybe he'll get to 1,500 days. Dude, for all we know, he could headline next year's WrestleMania in Philadelphia. Now, again, let's put it in perspective here. I mean, we've seen some numbers online. To eclipse Bruno Sammartino's record, I mean, he would have to be headlining WrestleMania in 2028. I mean, that's a long time from now. I don't think, again, I could be wrong. I don't think that's where they're heading with this, but I could be wrong. Who knows? I think I was holding on to hope that Roman was going to win. That was my guess. I think Paul swerved all of us because, again, it was not that it was becoming predictable, but it was sort of like leaning towards like, oh man, it's becoming obvious. Cody's going to win. Cody didn't win. Now, obviously, he got jumped by Brock Lesnar on Monday. And this is where the marks online, Pat, kind of go off into a tantrum. Like, oh, they're recycling 2012 again. Cena lost to Rock, and now, Cody's gonna have to go through a whole year.
They're the only people that make this connection, though. You realize that, right? Yeah. Nobody that's booking this shit. Nobody that's doing, well, we're gonna book him like Cena in 2012. They don't fucking say that. They're just like, hey, okay, we're not gonna make this predictable. Cody, we're gonna keep you away from the title until we decide to put you back into the title picture. Because remember, he said rematch, right? And Paul named all these other shows, but he didn't say WrestleMania, right? So maybe it's next year in Philadelphia. We leave the rematch thing kind of open-ended now. That's not to be continued, him and Roman. You know what I'm saying?
And also, too, Cody didn't lose clean, per se. So
he didn't lose clean. He still looks strong. More importantly, now, he's only going to look stronger because you're taking the sympathetic white meat babyface and you're putting him in there with a fucking monster like Brock Lesnar. So when he beats Brock Lesnar, that's going to mean a lot. and it's going to look pretty serious because this is a guy who kicked Roman's ass quite a lot. You know what I'm saying? Quite a lot. Yeah. So they're building this story further and further. And this notion that they're going to take away from the moment or anything like that. Did Cody look any less over to you on Monday when he came out for that segment?
No, he didn't. And again, I think that there's the dynamic again that he didn't lose cleanly. I think that adds to the allure of like this of the storyline. Like, hey, Cody didn't lose. He didn't. He even incorporated that into his into the promo. He was like, hey, I had you. Again, that element of like, I had you. You were vulnerable. Again, that adds to the intrigue of why you can keep going. Where Cody now again, the Marks just run with the narrative about, oh, well, just recycling 2012 and what happened to Cena. And look what happened to Cena the following year. He won at one of the more lackluster Manias, which we've talked about, at least in my opinion. But again, there's plenty to tell with the story, though, Pat. And I think you hit it on the head. You don't have to have him in the title picture right now. You can have him kind of not distracted per se, but more so like, hey, he's got other business to attend to. And let's be honest, it's not like Roman's going to be wrestling regularly anyway. He's not scheduled for Backlash. He's not scheduled for the King of the Ring, Queen of the Ring show in Saudi Arabia. Maybe he might be on a SmackDown here or two, maybe wrestling, who knows. But more likely, he'll be in London on 4th of July weekend for Money in the Bank. So, I mean, again, there's still a lot of time to stretch this out. So I just think I think Paul swerved us. But again, getting back to the premise about like who's running things. I mean, again, Michael Cole said it on Friday night. Oh, the guy who runs the place, the guy who runs the show. Now, again, the Marks are still going to have their conspiracies, Pat. They're going to be like, oh, well, Vince told him to say that to swerve us because Vince doesn't want to. I mean, that's what happened. And you read Twitter, and they were like, oh, well, 30 years of Vince telling Michael Cole what to say. What's one more thing? That was the premise Friday, which I think is nonsense. Again, going back to and again, I don't want to make this like I'm teaching business 101. But again, if something changed structurally within the company itself, they're legally obligated by the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, to make that information public. They haven't. So clearly nothing's changed. But again, Marks don't want to hear that. But
no. Yeah. No, they don't. They don't, Fern, because you know what? At the end of the day, these people are obsessed with their narrative. They're obsessed with nitpicking everything. I mean, we got this great weekend, this great WrestleMania weekend, okay, with 2 nights of great matches, stacked action, okay, and people are nitpicking. Oh, this one was better than that one. That one was better than this. This match was trash. This match was that. Yo, dude, all the matches were good. Even the matches that weren't that good or weren't that compelling for me were still very well done and very well produced. Okay, botches happens, things happen. It is what it is. But at the end of the day, these guys executed, man. They executed, and they executed at a very high level, man. And for whatever reason, Marks want to find something to fucking complain about, no matter what. So because this Raw after Mania wasn't good because most of the roster was sent home because they'd been on the road pretty much a week. Now all of a sudden people, oh, well, Vince is back because the show was rewritten and it sucked and this and that. Like, do you people forget that this guy's the one who came up with everything that you fucking like, everything that you mark out for, everything that you fucking own? A good chunk of these properties are his, and it's just like, it's no fucking respect. And it's the typical nonsense. It's the typical boogeyman bullshit that all these fucking Marks have. You know what I'm saying? So
no, I'm with you. I'm totally with you. And speaking of, talking about executing at a very high level, which is what Mania was this weekend, which we'll get to in a little bit. And now transitioning to not executing at a high level, let's move on to AEW, who's also in the news